"Not again, Dad," I said desperately as he barged into my room with yet another fancy new dress. This could only mean one thing: another date. My mom followed him inside and said, "We're off to a party now. Put those horrible books away and get to a salon. You clearly need a makeover." I rolled my eyes at them and said I wasn't going. Suddenly, their faces darkened and my dad said, "It wasn't a request. You have one job, Angela. Get married." I was starting to get pissed off and said I didn't see why they were so obsessed with me getting married. Mom glared at me and said I had to go on this date. She said the guy was the son of one of my dad's biggest business partners. "If you don't go, you can kiss your freedom goodbye for a month," Dad threatened. I had a huge party planned with my friends, and no way was I going to be stuck at home. I reluctantly prepared myself for the evening that awaited me. The guy picked me up at 7 p.m. He was about 4 inches shorter than me, and he had his oily hair pulled back. "Hey there, babe. Couldn't you find something better to wear?" I rolled my eyes and looked at his neon yellow shirt. While drinking soup at the restaurant, Mike, my date, burnt his tongue and screamed so hard that 2 of his front teeth fell out. I couldn't compose myself anymore. I grabbed a cab and rushed home. A few days later, my parents barged into my room and yelled at me for deliberately sabotaging their deal. What deal? Apparently, the guy's dad was going to sign a deal with Dad if I started dating him. I gagged. They were furious and wouldn't listen to me when I tried to tell them what had happened. Dad yelled, "Shut up, you ugly moron." Then they slammed the door shut. I was locked inside. Thankfully, that evening, my Uncle Tom came home. He got me out of the room and told my parents to act like normal people. Dad glared at him, but Mom jumped to her feet and said, "I don't need any advice from you. No one here needs a gay man's advice." Uncle Tom looked horrified. I felt so sorry for him. He looked at my parents and said, "Just behave or I'll take her away." With that, he was gone. The next day at school, a boy came up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Peter." I looked at him suspiciously. He looked familiar. Just then, behind him, the most gorgeous girl I had ever seen appeared. My jaw dropped, and Peter introduced her as his sister, Penny. They were twins. The twins and I quickly became friends, and I would often invite them over. Apparently, their parents were uber rich, so Mom and Dad didn't mind. But one day, Mom came up to me and told me I had another date that evening. When I got to the restaurant, I was shocked to see that the person they had tried to set me up with was none other than Peter. I was furious, and I ran right back out. How could he think this was okay? I'd never even flirted with him. Peter caught up with me and asked me what was wrong. I told him I didn't have any plans to date him, and he said he was sorry. Then he said my parents had forced him and his twin sister to be my friends. I was furious. I rushed home and confronted my parents. They started to yell at me. "Do you know just how much we paid their parents?" I was stunned. Why would you pay them at all? They said it was because I was so dumb and good for nothing that I couldn't even make friends. I decided that this was all too much, and I told them I was leaving. I called Uncle Tom and asked him to come and get me. I thought life would be easy now that I was no longer living with my psycho parents. But boy, was I wrong. At school the next day, Peter approached me, and I told him that I didn't want to be friends with him anymore. He looked disappointed, but smiled and said, "It's okay, Angela. I understand completely." Without responding, I turned to leave. I had wanted to make a gracious exit, but to my horror, not 5 steps later, my foot got caught in something and I fell on my face. My nose started to bleed, and I quickly gathered my stuff and rushed away while everyone stared at me. I ran into the girls' bathroom to clean my face. Just as I was done, a notification popped up on my phone. It read, "Hello, Angela. I hate to break it to you, but if you don't do everything I say, I'm going to tell everyone your biggest secret. I have your diary." I laughed at such an old-fashioned prank, but the text messages were pictures from pages of my diary where I had written my deepest, darkest secrets. No one could find out about them, or I would be over. I had no choice but to do as they said. I replied, "What do you want from me? I know who you really are," the message simply read. I asked them what they meant, but there was no reply. In fact, a new message didn't arrive until days later. I didn't know how long the silence would last, so I did the only thing I could think of. I tried to find out who it was. I had a plan to find out who could have stolen it. The next day, I snuck to the back of the school. I hid my face from the security cameras and then pulled the fire alarm. Immediately, everyone rushed out of the school. I checked to make sure that nobody was in the security room and then quickly searched for the older videos. I transferred all of the data onto my flash drive. Just as I was about to leave, one of the security guards came in. As soon as he saw me, he yelled, "Hey you, stop right there." I ran for dear life. I managed to outrun him and escape the school. Once I was safe, I checked my bag, and to my despair, I realized I'd dropped the flash drive somewhere. I'd missed my chance. But before I could investigate further, I got this message. "Ha ha ha. I know what you did, and I know why you did it. So you like being a spy, huh? Well, do I have a mission for you?" I read the next message in shock. This was going to be horrible. If anything bad happened, my parents would kill me. The next day, as instructed, I called my mom. At first, she was angry that I'd called her, but when she heard what I had to say, she was thrilled. My blackmailer had told me to ask my parents to set me up on a date. That evening, I found myself face to face with one of the most boring people I could imagine. The minute I reached out to shake his hand, he pulled me in for a kiss. Ew! The boy wouldn't take no for an answer. And 5 minutes into the date, I dumped a glass of water onto his head. He screamed, jumped back, and threatened to destroy my parents. He said he was my dad's boss's son. I couldn't believe my ears. The very next day, Dad lost his job. Mom called and yelled at me for deliberately ruining their lives. I tried to explain, but obviously she didn't listen. "You are the worst possible child. If only I'd never had a second child," I gasped. This was the first time my mother had mentioned my brother in a very, very long time. "Mom, listen to me." I tried to explain things to her, but she hung up. My phone screen lit up. Ha ha ha, that was a fun show. I was furious. Whoever this person was, he or she was ruining my life. And I had a feeling that this was just the beginning. I was right. The next message asked me to do something even worse. Something I hadn't been prepared for. "Forget it," I messaged. "Are you sure? Are you truly ready for your secret to come out?" The truth was, I wasn't, but I also didn't think I could do this. So I didn't reply. Maybe I should have. The next day when I went to school, Penny marched up to me. "You are disgusting, Angela. I hate you. Stop spreading rumors about me." I tried to ask her what was wrong, but she slapped me in the face in front of everyone. Then she left. My phone pinged. I took it out and saw another message. "Enjoy." Oh no. Sure enough, I then received a link to a TikTok video. I played it. It said, "I'm gay, so I go on dates just to break men's hearts." It was followed by a video of me dumping water on my last date's head, the one who got my dad fired. To make matters worse, the video ended with a picture from my diary with mine and Penny's names written in hearts. My phone suddenly blew up with thousands of messages from Mom and Dad. All my friends were calling me too. Everyone wanted to know if this was true. I rushed home to Uncle Tom and barged into his room. Mom and Dad were already sitting there. They looked at me and then at Tom, waiting for him to say something. He got to his feet very slowly and said, "I'm sorry, Angela, but you can't live with me anymore." I was horrified. I asked him why, and he said that my parents were disowning me and wouldn't give me a single penny now that I had come out. They had also threatened to sue him if he tried to help me. I asked my parents if it was true, and they acted as if I weren't even there. I was certainly homeless. There was nowhere to go. There was no reason to stay in this town since everyone either hated me or thought I was a joke. Besides, I didn't want to play into the blackmailer's hands anymore. With whatever money I had, I moved to another town. In this new place, I got a job at McDonald's and even managed to enroll in college. Except for the occasional threatening message from my parents, it seemed like my life was almost headed towards normalcy. Or so I thought. On the very first day of college, I bumped into Peter. I had almost completely forgotten about him. He asked me what I studied, and I was thrilled to find out that we were doing the same major. I wasn't really thrilled, but at least I finally had a friend here. He was always with me. We hung out together, and he even got a job at McDonald's too. One day, he asked me out on a date. "I never truly got over you," he said, looking like a lovesick puppy. After all of my parents' messages, I knew that they would never accept a girl as my partner, so I gave in and agreed to date Peter. The very next day, I got a message from my parents telling me that they were so happy I was dating a guy. How the hell did they know? Was there no escaping these two? But the worst was yet to come. A few days after Peter and I started dating, he invited me to his house. While he was making dinner, I began to roam around the hallway when I came across a door he usually kept locked. He told me it was his storeroom. I went inside and almost passed out. This was no storeroom. The room was full of pictures of me, some of them as old as high school. Suddenly, a thought occurred to me, and I began to explore more. Where is it? Where is it? And then I saw it. In the middle of a pile of paper, my diary. I almost threw up. Peter! It had been Peter all along. But that's when he saw me leave the room. His jaw dropped. "Angela, I can explain, but there was nothing he could say about this." I ran to my place and locked the doors. Suddenly, I heard a knock on the door. I was almost certain Peter had followed me home. I looked through the peephole and almost jumped back in shock. It was the last person I had expected. Penny. I slowly opened the door to let her in, and almost passed out when I saw who was standing behind her. It was my brother, Zach. I hadn't seen him in years. I just stood there in shock with my mouth open. Penny explained that her crazy brother had told her he was dating me, and she had tried to warn me about the psycho that he was. Zach was with her because apparently the two had been dating. Just then, we heard Peter banging loudly on the door. "Angela, please let me explain. I love you and I want to marry you." "Let me handle this," Zach said. Zach had suddenly left many years ago when I was very young, and the very next day, I'd heard my parents fighting. That's when I discovered my biggest secret. I never told anyone. When he came back, he apologized to me. "Angie, I'm sorry I left you alone with our crazy parents." He said he hated that Mom and Dad had tried to force him into medical school. "Moving out was my only option," he said. I was really surprised. I thought he left because of me. We started hanging out a lot, and he was always trying to make up for what he called not being there for me. Then one day, he called me and said he had a surprise for me. I was psyched as I waited for him. When he finally came, I was stunned to see his surprise, Dad. I couldn't believe Dad had agreed to come and see me. Dad begged for my forgiveness and asked me to come home. He even said that he would set me up with a pretty girl. I told him to stay away from me and my private life, but Zach said I should forgive him and try to fix my relationship. So I moved back. To my surprise, Dad was very kind to me, even though Mom was her usual mean self. She kept insulting Dad. "I can't believe you let this horrible embarrassment move back," she said to him every time she saw me. One day, I got a call from Zach, and he told me to meet him at his place. He was panicky and crying, so I rushed over. Just as I got into my car, a hooded man grabbed my arm. "We have your brother," he whispered threateningly into my ear and dragged me with him. He took me to a dark place. There, he told me that he would only let Zach go if I signed a piece of paper for them. Terrified, I picked up a pen while Zach sat across the table from me, crying. Just as I was about to sign, the door flew open, and Penny rushed in. "Don't do it, Angela," she yelled. Zach jumped up and tried to force me to sign, but I pulled back. What was happening? Someone from behind Penny jumped at her and tried to drag her away, but she ran and yelled, "Your dad and your brother are tricking you." That was when a commotion outside caught my attention. We all rushed outside, and I saw that the police were there with my dad. Apparently, my dad was caught sneaking behind the building. He had known where to come. This could only mean, "Yes, I know you aren't my child. I hate you, and I will ruin you." He screamed out my biggest secret for everyone to hear. "But, Dad, it wasn't my fault," I tried to say. "I don't care," he yelled. He said he loved my mom too much to do anything to her, but he had found a letter from my real dad, and he had given me all his money. "I kept you for all these years, and my son left because of you. The least you could do to pay me back for everything I've done is to give me the money. Dad screamed as he was dragged away by the police. Penny stood by me, her hand on my shoulder. She said she was really sorry for how she had treated me in high school, and she couldn't let Peter or my family hurt me. We were best friends once. We hugged. Finally, my biggest secret was exposed, but so were my dad and brother.